that they will actually be full this month. And our collections from our 2% tourism development levy for July 2024 increased 18.87% over the same period in 2023. Collections for July 2024 have increased 320.38% over 2019, which is our last period before COVID. And we have had a year-to-date increase of our TDL as of June of 6.14%. To put that in terms of real numbers, last year up to June, we had collected $2.5 million. And this year so far, we've collected $2.725 million from our TDL. So I believe it is correct to say that we are moving in the right direction and hopeful that we continue in that vein. I would leave matters there, except to say that I take this opportunity now to invite all of those who have come home for Culturama, all of those who have come home for the homecoming celebration, to a welcome cocktail reception that is being hosted by the government at the Malcolm Guichard Park on Monday, the 29th of July, so that's next Monday, from 5 to 7:30 p.m. So if you're home, whether you're home from somewhere in the Caribbean, you're home from the UK, US, Canada, we're inviting you to come and have a drink and mix and mingle and have an opportunity to meet the members of the government and to bring your concerns, your observations, and also to hear what plans we have as we continue to build out our beautiful island of Nevis. So I'm inviting all who have come home to come to the Malcolm Guichard Park on Monday next week from 5 to 7:30 p.m. for a cocktail event in your honor that we are hosting at that venue. And we're hoping to see you there, and they say the dress code is elegant. So whatever that means, look good, and we look forward to seeing you. I will now open the floor for any questions that members of the press may have. Thank you very much.
Good morning, Mr. Premier. Elke Hewlett, Department of Information. Recently, I saw some photos of a very busy Vance International Amri Airport. Seems like everybody's trying to get to Nevis for C-50. Do you have any figures as it relates to the airlift into the facility recently? Also, on a more serious note, the Social Security Board is proposing an increase in the pension qualification age, possibly to 65 or 67. Would the NIA consider increasing the retirement age to mitigate any revenue or income gap for retirees, if that's the case, if they implement that? On the same note, the Social Security Board is also proposing an increase in the Social Security contribution by both employees and employers. Would that create further increase in the cost of living, considering that persons would be taking home a little less, and then, of course, businesses would be passing that extra expense on to consumers? So it's basically a double whammy. Okay, it seems as though the federal government has done away with the CBI dividend. Do you know if double salary is next on the chopping block, or double partial salary, whatever they paid last year? And if the federal government does not pay public servants any kind of bonus in Christmas, is the NIA prepared to, minded to, or would consider paying their public servants a little something in December? And I think I'll end it here for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Hewlett. I know that you asked the first question about airlift, and then you say you were going on to more serious things, and you started to talk about bonus for public servants. I'm not sure if you mean that was the most serious thing. It's interesting that let me start there, because it's interesting the way you put it. And I think you have put it the way that most of the public sees it. You say they've done away with the CBI dividend, and whether or not they're going to do away with double salary. And the reason you put it that way, I suspect, Ms. Hewlett, is because we have become now accustomed to the idea that every Christmas public servants are going to get a bonus. I'm not sure where that idea came from and why it is now the customary thing. And I would want to disabuse our minds from that and tell people that their salary is what they work for. They should manage their financial affairs based on their salary, and they should not, how should I say, bank on a double salary or some bonus payment every December. The bonus payment is normally made when there has been a good performance in terms of the country and its economic outlook, and ought not to be seen as an entitlement by persons every single year. I got myself into considerable hot water last year because I indicated that, in my view, bonuses should go to people who deserve it. Bonuses should go to people who have worked hard and have contributed. And I felt then, and I still feel, that giving everybody a bonus is a disincentive to those who work hard. Because if I'm getting the same bonus like the person who's allergic to work and who's always late and always take 2 hours for lunch and always down at the bar in town drinking rum, then I start to feel to myself that perhaps I ought to put in less effort, because my extra effort, my diligence, is not really being rewarded because I'm getting the same as the bad worker. So for me, it is important that we set some standards. And I have advocated and continue to advocate that what we ought to be doing is compensating people according to their performance. They call it pay for performance. So I believe that there ought to be some criteria, Ms. Hewlett, and that those who satisfy that criteria should be the ones who should put up their hand at the end of the year and say, see me here, give me something extra because I've worked hard. Those who know they have not worked and who are already gone and order things at courts and hospitals because they expect a double salary, I want to urge them to change that approach. So I don't know what the federal government is going to do, and I don't know what the NIA is going to do. Those are matters for the cabinet, and clearly I'm just one person, I'm not the cabinet. So all I will say is that our people should cut their cloth, cut their suit to suit their cloth. That's how the elderly people used to say. We grew up with that adage. A lot of our people spending money they don't yet have. And then they vex with government because they say, well, I was expecting that I going to get this and I didn't get it, so now I'm in debt. Don't do that. Spend what you have. Order your affairs in accordance with what you know that you're entitled to, not what you feel that you should get. I think that's an important lesson for us. So I won't go any further with that very serious question that you've asked about bonuses to public servants. You talk about Social Security. What I will say is that the proposals from Social Security, as I understand them, are under consultation. In fact, I think I saw something recently saying that Social Security will be having a series of town hall meetings. Raising the age, I believe, Ms. Hewlett, is going to be inevitable. Why? The obvious reason is that people are living longer. And the longer we live, the more pressure will be placed on Social Security. It may sound inelegant of me to put it this way, but the shorter people live, the better it is for Social Security in terms of their payout. So the longer we live, so more people are living into their late 70s and 80s and even 90s. In fact, on Nevis, we now have the most centenarians in the country, and some who are likely, with God's grace, to get to that number in short order as well. So people are living longer. So when people are retiring at 62, but living until 80 or 90, it means that they will be putting considerable pressure on the resources of Social Security. And remember, Social Security is really, how should I put it? It's a financial scheme, meaning those who are working today, the young, the able-bodied, those are the ones who are contributing, and the intention is that those who are contributing will support those who are no longer contributing because they are now retired and elderly. So as our people live longer lives, more productive lives, I think it's inevitable that Social Security will try to increase the age of retirement they increase the age at which persons will get the benefit. And that too will mean that the government and the private sector may have to respond, because you point out a very valuable observation that if persons are being asked to retire at 62, say in the government, as is now the rule, but Social Security doesn't kick in until they're 67, it means that they have a 5-year gap in terms of income. So that will have to be looked at, because you don't want, in an effort to save Social Security from going bankrupt, you create hardship in the community. So the government may also have to adjust. We have just adjusted because for many decades the retirement age was 55. And you could understand a retirement age of 55 when people were only living until they're 60 and 65. But now that people are living until they're 70 and 80, and with the quality of life and modern medicine, people are living longer, healthier lives. I was at the 90th birthday party for Miss Mary Herbert from there in Zetlands, an area they call Cocogut, just last weekend, and I was astonished to see the video footage of her dancing with the Masquerades at 90. Strong, fully cognizant of everything around her, all her faculties in good order. And so we have the reality that the society is changing. People are living longer, and as a consequence, government, private sector, Social Security will have to change. I don't think people should be afraid of the changes. People should just understand that these are necessary changes as the society and as the island evolves. And so I look forward to the consultation, because the observations you have made are spot on. If employers are asked to pay more, if employees are asked to pay more, how does that impact your cost of living? How does that impact your cost of doing business? All of these are going to be relevant considerations which I think need to be ventilated in the consultation process. Airlift at Vance Armour International Airport, yes, we've had an increase in airlift because people are coming in. Regrettably, Ms. Hewlett, I don't have numbers for you, but we are seeing an increase. In fact, over the last weekend, I think largely fueled by the athletics meet that we had at the Mondo track. We had teams coming in from Antigua, from Anguilla, etc. I want to commend Mr. Timothy Keynes and his team for the partnership that they've created to have the Culturama Games. And that brings in a large cohort of young athletes each year. And so we may have seen a spike over the weekend with those coming in and then, of course, departing after the games. But you are right that we're seeing increased activity there, and we're hopeful that that could continue. I would have mentioned the scheduled services now from St. Thomas daily, St. Croix twice weekly, from Anguilla, from Antigua using Trans-Anguilla, and now 3 times weekly from Winier coming out of St. Martin. So we're seeing an uptick in traffic, and we've been trying very hard, of course, as we get ready to launch our program for the development of the Vance Armour International Airport. Any other questions for me?
Good morning, Premier Brantley.
Good
Danella Thompson, Von Radio.
Morning, Ms. Thompson.
So the Nevis Cultural Committee, as you stated, would have recently held the C50 Wet Fete, and this is also during a time when the island, as you said, would be suffering from a water supply shortage. So what was the source of water that would have been used for the event, and would it have affected the public water supply on the island? Additionally, can an update be provided on the airport project? Thirdly, what is the status of the dispatcher's emergency system in terms of activation? With the increase of vehicles on Nevis' streets and the expected increase in persons and rentals being on the island, has there or will there be an increase in traffic wardens and officers on the streets, also patrolling for criminal activity and what's not? And finally, following the worldwide cyber issue, which affected airports, healthcare, and financial operations, were there any issues sustained within the NIA or any such reports made to the NIA? Thank you.
Thank you as always for your questions, Ms. Thompson, and for Vaughan Radio for being here diligently to carry this press conference. Let me say that as far as I know, the water that would have been used at the wet fet would have come from private sources, meaning that this water is usually not from our public supply, but from cisterns that the providers, the people who provided water, that they would furnish. We have also been blessed recently with some rains. In fact, as you're asking the question, the Lord decided to send the rain to help answer the question that you're asking. And I know you may well say to me that that's not a full answer, because I learned something interesting when the wet fet was happening. A young lady told me if rain falls, she's not going to wear. And I said, well, I don't understand, because I would have thought if the rains come, that is more wet for the wet fet. But they don't want the rain to wet them. They want the hose to wet them. Don't ask me, because I don't understand it. But a young lady told me that if rains came, she was not going to the wet fet. Right? So it's an interesting thing. But not to make light of it, it's an important question. It is something we agonized over. But I can tell you that through the management of the water facilities and the water resource that we have, you would realize, Ms. Thompson, that we have not had any water woes in recent weeks. And that's because the rains have come, praise be to God for that, and we are managing in a much better way. In fact, I believe the last report we saw from our minister, the Honorable Spencer Brand, he said that our water tanks, or water reservoirs, were above 75%. So we feel that over the period we should be fine for water management. But my understanding, I put it no higher than that, because I have not checked, but my understanding is that water used for the wet fet does not come from our water mains and our water supply. So it should have had no effect on the water supply. The airport project, we have not been saying much about it because we have been involved with Culturama. But the intention is that as soon as Culturama is finished, we are going to go forward with that project. The last phase of the negotiations with one remaining landowner, we are trying to settle that. And once we have settled that, we are ready to move forward. The architects and the engineers have been doing their work in the meantime, so not because you haven't heard much being said, the work has continued. And the Honorable Alexis Jeffers, who's leading that project, has indicated that we will be ready to proceed as soon as this final bit of land is negotiated and secured. So that's where we are, and I will come in subsequent press conferences, I hope, to update you and the members of the media and the public about what's happening. We also anticipate that we will have, I believe, another 1 or 2 public town hall meetings about the airport project. Dispatchers, again, as far as I know, that program was initiated already. The dispatchers are working out of our CCTV command center in the heart of Charlestown, and that program should have already been initiated. I believe that they are on staff, they're being paid by the government. That was our part of the responsibility, and as you know, the equipment and the training was provided through the Four Seasons and the Four Seasons Homeowners Association. I believe some additional equipment is due to come, but we have trained a large cohort of persons, not only for the dispatch, but we also train people in CPR, in various response mechanisms. And so that has happened as well, and we're quite proud, because if that project succeeds, it will be the first in the Federation, and we hope that St. Kitts will then adopt what we're doing on the island of Nevis. You asked about the increase of vehicles, a very, very good question. For Culturama 50, most of the car rental agencies are sold out. In fact, if you, like me, drive around, you would have seen that at Wally Hotel, there was a large fleet of rental vehicles over there. That's in fact Hertz rent a car from St. Kitts. They brought over the entire fleet to Nevis for Culturama. So there is a tremendous amount of traffic on the roads. We have invested in the roads so the roads are nice and smooth. And sometimes people say the roads are so smooth they don't realize how fast they're going. I'm urging persons, please, to drive responsibly, to not drink and drive. And if you're going out to party, to have a designated driver. That person will drink water, and juice all night, and that person will do the driving. Because with better roads, the tendency to drive faster is already there, and you infuse that with alcohol and intoxication, you have the potential for quite some catastrophe. As they say in traffic, the life you save might be your own. And so I'm using this pulpit, this rostrum, to encourage our people to drive responsibly. Right now, the way I'm driving on the road when I do drive is once I see a rental plate, I exercise extra caution, because I anticipate that those may be persons who are not from here and don't maybe know all the nooks and crannies. So I urge persons to drive responsibly and to drive at the speed limit. And I certainly will anticipate that the police and the traffic department in particular will be out in force during the season. Ms. Thompson, you may not know, members of the press may not know, but every year the police produce a document setting out how they intend to provide security for the festival. And so we anticipate that the police this year will be no different and do no different, and that, as is the usual course, the forces in Nevis will be augmented by members of the police and security forces on St. Kitts for purposes of the festival. But I certainly urge you and others on the road to drive carefully. Those who are visiting, to drive carefully, and let us go through this Culturama with no incidents of any kind. Cyber issue globally. I gather it was something to do with CrowdStrike, which is a company providing data protection. My understanding from news reports is that it was a software update that they had created which produced this problem, and that it appeared to have been a problem that particularly affected Microsoft users. My understanding from our IT department is that there was no significant effect here, and that our services were not disrupted as a result. So I'm grateful for that. Anything further for me?
Okay, Hewlett Department of Information. I have two questions from Glenn Bart from SKN Newsline over on St. Kitts. He asks, with the highly competitive nature of tourism and given it is a significant component of the Nevis economy, do you believe there is a current capacity for Nevis to expand visitor arrivals for the upcoming tourist season? In addition, please highlight essential components of Nevis's overall tourism development strategy for the next 5 years. His other question, Nevis has made important progress in agriculture. Is there substantial scope for agro-processing for high-value niche products aimed at exports? That's from Mr. Bat, SKN Newsline.
Well, taking his last question first, obviously we've been talking about agriculture, agro-processing, value added for some time. And it is an area, in my view, Mr. Bat, that could well do with some additional investment. The government cannot do it alone. We've talked about the poultry industry, which again, we have been delayed, but we are assuring the public that it's something that we continue to work on delivering. And the intention really is to achieve our 25 by 25 agenda, which has been set by CARICOM to reduce imports of food, certain food products by 25% by 2025. We feel we can do that, especially if we're able to get the poultry industry going, because as you know, chicken is the most common and most popular dish, meat kind, used by our people. So there is some room there for agro-processing, and it's an area that we're actively pushing and encouraging private sector investment. We have mangoes, for example, and I commented recently to someone that early in June we had so much mango available on the island. Mangoes in abundance, all varieties. And here we are in July and mangoes are now scarce. We have enough mangoes during mango season that we should never be out of mango in Nevis. And all we need to do is agro-process it. We need to preserve it. We need to pulp it, we need to freeze it, we need to convert it into other things. But really and truly, you should be able to have Emripoli or whatever your favorite mango is all year round. So those are things that talk about value added. Imagine our Emripoli mango reaching the tables all around the world. Why not? but we really need persons to invest. And many people sit back and wait for government. But these areas, I think, are ripe for private sector investment. Mr. Bart has asked for a 5-year strategy. Mr. Bart, this is a press conference that is scheduled to end soon. Don't know if I can give you a 5-year strategy. What I will say to you is that we have been continuing to promote Nevis to the segment of the market to which we cater. That is the high-end segment, the more affluent segment. I would have mentioned earlier our new initiative in relation to African-American travelers and the fact that we've just appointed what we're calling a diversity ambassador to get us into some of those rooms, to talk to different groups and to create a more diverse, but still our yardstick is affluent customer base. We have been doing quite well based on the numbers that I would have quoted earlier in terms of our tax receipts and returns, in terms of the occupancy. And so we see the capacity is certainly there to expand further. You know, we have had the debate for a long time about Nevis needing more hotels. And obviously the investment would be good. But we also have a situation where most of the hotels would tell us that annually their occupancy is 60% or less. So that tells us that for a significant part of the year, we have 40% or more of our hotel rooms empty. It would seem logical to me, therefore, that before we start to talk about more hotels and more hotel rooms, that we develop strategies to fill the existing hotel rooms for more of the year. And that's why I mentioned earlier that I was so pleased that the Four Seasons is saying that they have buyouts in July. Because ordinarily at this point, occupancy falls off the cliff and they don't have many people on the island. But that has changed. The culture has changed. We see more people traveling. We've seen more pent-up demand since COVID. And so, Mr. Bart, we continue to press on. But we do feel that we have the capacity year over year to increase the numbers of visitors that are coming to Nevis and who are helping to keep our restaurants, our allied sectors, our fisheries, fisher folk, our lobster divers, our conch divers, our transportation sector, our bus drivers and taxi drivers, keep them all afloat. So we're certainly looking forward to that and to ensuring that we have a product that is world class and a product that people desire. And so this playbook, ladies playbook undertaking that I spoke to earlier, where we're now getting a direct line into the National Football League, into the Players Association, into the wives of the NFL players. As a matter of fact, Mrs. Burleson, Atoya Burleson, who's leading this charge, said to us that it is the wives who decide with a family holiday. And I said, great. So if the wives can decide we're going to go to Nevis, then that's a beautiful thing for us. So that is what we are trying to do. So we are partnering in very significant ways, and I want to publicly thank the Four Seasons Resort, the new manager Billy Cueto, and his team. They have really been solid partners for us as we continue in our efforts to promote the island of Nevis. Any more questions for me?
Elke Hewlett, one final question. Your last response actually correlates to what I wanted to ask. Nevis appears to have become the liming hotspot in the Federation in recent years. I moved from St. Kitts to Nevis, and when I go out here, I swear I'm back in St. Kitts the amount of petitions I see. Whether it's during the daytime coming over to the beach for lunch or attending events, whether sporting events, whatever, you just are seeing more inter-island travel. What do you attribute this upsurge in popularity in relation to St. Kitts and Nevis and the travel?
Good government in Nevis. Good government in Nevis. Good policies in Nevis. You know, let me go back, because I say it, and I know people out there listening will smile, and some may even see it as a little funny. But I want our people to understand that as a government, we are constantly thinking. We're constantly trying to see what we can do better. During COVID, I go back there, Nevis was at a standstill. Hotels were closing, borders were closed, the island was in trouble. We saw our revenue dwindle away to almost nothing. And we brainstormed, and as Minister of Tourism, I came up with the idea of saying, listen, if we can't travel out, then invite people to travel internally. And so we came up with this idea of staycation, where we invited our brothers and sisters in St. Kitts to come and see Nevis and spend time in Nevis. And I'm telling you that there were some hotels in Nevis like Oali and some of the smaller hotels that initiative kept afloat. So a lot of Kittitians were coming over. And then during COVID, we adopted a different approach to the federal government. In that, we allowed in Nevis some activities to occur. I recall that there was a particular event, I think it was called Faded, and it happened at weekends on the beach. And I happened to pass through, and some youngsters from St. Kitts told me how grateful they were that they could come out and enjoy themselves. And it was because, again, the government said we had to innovate. We couldn't just sit back and allow the island to die. And so Kittitians, I remember being at Sunshines one night and speaking to two Kittitians, and they said to me that Nevis had become their Miami, because they were accustomed to go in Miami for the weekend. They can't travel now, so they came to Nevis. And we used that opportunity, difficult as it was, to introduce Nevis to a new generation of Kittitians. Because many of us in this country will be surprised to know that a lot of Kittitians had never set foot on Nevis before. You tell them Charlestown, they get lost.